Our politically incorrect segment tonight: on January 1st of next year, 2018, transgender recruits will be allowed to enlist in the United States military. This means the Pentagon has about 2 weeks to train 23,000 military personnel on the subject of transgender individuals before the beginning of the year. How is this going to help us win wars? How is this going to help us save lives? And if it's not going to help us win wars and keep our military personnel safe, why are we using the military as a giant social experiment? With me now, Chairman of Gator PAC, Colonel Rob Maness. Colonel Maness, thanks for joining me, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, Colonel, we're going to be accused of being transphobic for having this conversation, but I refuse to let that make me cower. This is an important conversation. The lives of our military personnel, the men and women who fight for our freedom, could be on the line due to policies like this. And I want to ask you, 23,000 personnel needing to be trained, that's a lot of people. That's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. That training is going to require a lot of people to conduct the training, as well as the 23,000. Colonel Maness, how much money is this going to cost our military?
Oh, much more than $1 million, I'm sure. But the cost in resources over the next 2 weeks, look, this is the 15th of December. The holidays are coming up. We're at war. We have folks in combat. We have folks that need to be trained to finish their training to deploy into combat. And we can't afford the resources that it takes to do this, not just in financial resources, but the resources in personnel. The few times that American forces and our allied forces get time off is to spend time with their families when they are at home over the Christmas holidays and Hanukkah and all the other various holidays that we see at this time of year. And it's ridiculous that the judiciary, once again, is overreaching itself into national security matters that the President of the United States, obviously, according to our Constitution, which is still the law of the land, I believe, has absolute control and decision-making authority over.
Right, and it's interesting to me that this past year we've seen, what was it, 3 Navy ships in Southeast Asia that they couldn't stop, container ships, these small vessels, from ramming into them. They blamed these accidents on, some of them, by the way, that cost American sailors lives. They blamed these accidents on lack of resources, lack of training, lack of finances, and lack of personnel. Those are the very same 4 elements that are going to be used for this training on transgender individuals. And I did not serve in the military. You did, sir. So tell me if I'm missing something here. But what would go into a decision that would convince someone that it was a good idea to take even more resources from the men and women who are currently deployed, serving on ships, and give it to a social experiment, give it to people to train personnel on transgender individuals who aren't even at this time allowed in the military?
Well, first of all, the individuals making the decision have no experience whatsoever in what it takes to prepare military forces to go into combat, to what it takes to prepare them to be trained to deploy and operate in an austere environment, an environment where people are trying to kill them, and to prepare their families for their military members to move into that environment and away from them. So these individuals that are making these decisions and forcing the executive branch to do these types of things, they lack the experience. They are overly focused on their agendas from a political perspective. I noticed that former Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus is quoted in quite a few of these articles and actually wrote a letter for the court case. Well, Secretary Mabus is not serving at the enlisted level in the United States Navy or any other military service, has been out of office for over a year, and really has no idea what's going on. In the time since he left office, the United States of America and its allies have crushed the Islamic State and the Caliphate over in the Middle East. Iraq just announced that it now has full control over its borders, and the situation is entirely different. And this also puts us in the jeopardy of bringing in individuals that may not be ready for military service. The good news is that the Secretary of Defense and the military services have put rules in place where you can't have had any gender dysphoria symptoms for at least 18 months. The government and the military is not going to be forced to do the surgeries to do a gender reassignment. You have to have been through all of that, and you have to be able to prove that you're stable. But that's not enough, really. This situation, I believe, transgenderism is incompatible with military service because even if you get beyond the ability to take care of yourself and not be mentally distressed in different environments, you still have to take medications, and doctors have to be specially trained. The other medical personnel have to be specially trained. You have to have the psychiatric services and those kind of things. And I just don't think that it's compatible with military service.
No, no, and I have family members who serve in the military, in the medical corps in the military, and let me tell you, the booklet of disqualifying medical conditions just to enter the military, it's about this thick. I mean, they're very discriminatory, and that's
Yeah,
a good thing. Discriminatory means that
it
they
is.
set high standards. They need these men and women to be fully capable and in shape mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's not a negative commentary on any of these conditions that the individuals have. And that's, I guess, where we get to the political part of this. Why can't liberal activists, even people who consider themselves to be transgender activists, why can't they separate the idea of transphobia from the idea that our fighting force is supposed to be the most elite fighting force in the world? If you can't run fast enough, if you weigh too much, in some cases, if you're female, if you have flat feet, if you've ever had a broken bone, I mean, there are any number of everyday characteristics that you either are in control of or many that you aren't in control of that disqualify you. Why are they conflating the two things and acting like, well, if you don't allow transgender people to serve, then you're being transphobic? It's not true.
Well, they're trying to conflate the fact that they say this is a right. It's a right to serve instead of a condition. Service is conditional, as you mentioned, many of those things. Look, I served for over 30 years of my life, but if I wanted to serve again today, there are some things that are within my control that I would have to get fixed before I would be eligible to serve. That's just the way it is. As you get older, you know, your body changes and you have to make sure that you're in the best shape. I wouldn't put myself into combat today based on the conditions that I'm currently under, but we've got to get past the politics of this. This is about combat readiness, and as Secretary Maness has said, and every commander will tell you, and I've been a commander several times, we'll all tell you, look, we don't care what policy you put on us. If it's as long as it's a policy that's going to increase our combat readiness and give us the resources to make sure our forces and their families are ready to meet the mission. And the mission of the United States Armed Forces is finding and killing America's enemies and the enemies of freedom around the world.
Right, and that's what the focus should be. And perhaps it's just a lack of perspective since less than 1% of Americans do serve in the military. Perhaps they don't have an idea. But you'd think it'd be the responsibility of people, especially in our government, especially people who are making these policy decisions, to research and gain that perspective, to equip the men and women who are willing to die for our freedom to actually be able to do that to the best of their ability. Colonel Maness, thank you for your service, sir, and thanks for being on the show today. Our next tipping point with Lila Rowe is the first successful prosecution in the Planned Parenthood baby body parts case. 2 companies admitted guilt, but you won't hear this from the mainstream media because they are afraid for you to know the truth. So we'll tell you everything you need to know. Stick with us. It's all straight ahead.